Chapter 16, March 15, 1915. During the last few days, the housewives of Neuburg had been very much confused. It was no longer possible for them to buy as much groceries as they wanted or even needed. A food shortage was threatening. The government found it necessary to make the people economize by controlling their purchases. The magistrate distributed tickets which told each citizen how much food he was entitled to. Furthermore, the law had regulated the costs of all products. Large price lists were posted on every important street corner of the city. An announcement in our paper said, "Citizens of Neuburg, His Majesty the King, in his almighty wisdom, gave to you a law. He offered you an opportunity to prove your loyalty and patriotism. The ruling our sovereign is infallible, for God guards and guides the house of Wittelsbach." A few lines printed in heavy letters said, "Germans at home, you too are soldiers. Unite with our heroes on the battlefield, fight, sacrifice and lead the fatherland to victory and glory." This article was 2 columns long. At the bottom of the page was written, "Merchants or consumers who sell or buy products without tickets or who demand or offer higher prices will be severely punished by the law. The fine is 500 marks and 6 months in jail." "Well, girls," said Mama, folding the paper, "our boys offer their chests to the cause and we, our stomachs." Nevertheless, we were not worried. Each person was allowed 2 pounds of sugar per month. We were 7 members in our family. Mama said that we never used more than 8 to 10 pounds of sugar during the winter months, and we hoped that the war would be over before the next fruit season. The bread situation was more serious. The official tickets entitled each person to 5 pounds of bread per month. This of course would have been plenty, but the baker didn't have that much to sell. We had but occasionally purchased from his shop, for it was only the very wealthy who could pay his prices. The new law made it possible for every person to buy bread, yet this did not provide the baker with more flour. His supply was limited, and it was those who came first who were served. At daybreak the people waited at his store. One morning Fanny asked me to go to the baker. She bribed me with 10 pfennig because she was not feeling well. It was a cold, foggy dawn. I stood in line with a crowd of disgruntled women bemoaning their fate, the war, and cursing the baker. "His bread is black and heavy," complained one of them. "He sells it for wheat bread and I'm sure it's half corn," another cried indignantly. As the door finally opened, we all pushed in as if gold was our goal. The baker was a tall, strong-looking fellow. With his bare arms covered with flour he wiped sweat pearls from his forehead. With a weary sigh, he took our tickets and money and handed us each a steaming loaf of bread. "I pay for wheat," snapped the woman, "don't cheat me with corn." The baker, seemingly unruffled, took her bread back and said calmly, "You can leave it, hundreds would be grateful for it." The infuriated woman raged, "Men like you are only good for bullets." With a forced smile he straightened his shoulders, knocked his large hand against his chest and gasped for breath. A whistling noise from his ravaged lungs stopped the woman from insulting him further. She, too, knew that this man was not fit to wear the king's uniform. After an embarrassed silence he coughed hoarsely and continued serving the other women. Luckily the Hoffmans did not have to depend solely on the bread provisioned by their tickets. We still had several sacks of wheat stored in our attic and Mama knew how to bake far better than the baker. The milk and butter question, however, caused me lots of worries and discomforts. Of course, we received tickets which entitled us to 1 liter of milk and 1 pound of butter per day. But Mama insisted that the milk from official stores was cut with water and that the price of butter was too high for her budget. Of all the 7 members of our family, she chose me to help her provide her household with these most vital products. I didn't dare to protest, for I remembered the words of an officer who spoke to us school children in our auditorium. He had said, "You, too, belong to the big army of German women." Furthermore, Felix once explained to me that any battle would be lost as soon as one man disobeyed orders. I had imagined myself many times in the places of the French children who ran for their lives while the enemy plundered and burned their homes. I shuddered with the thought that Germany would lose the battle, the enemy invade the country, burn my German home and destroy everything I had learned to love. Frightened by such dreadful pictures, I thought I had better do my part in the great army of German women. So, I obeyed Mama's orders and trailed my little wagon 3 times a week to the farm for butter and milk. Rain or shine, I made the distance along the highway, through the winding path of the forest to the little town of Neuburg in 2 hours. One of its straw-thatched houses was on the Hoffman farm. As I opened the gate, I was always greeted by a noisy flock of geese. Hissed at by the old gander, who rushed toward me with spread wings and rigid neck. Napoleon, the faithful Saint Bernard, would pull at his chain and bark furiously. One day Feeny, Clara and I found the farmkeeper sitting on the slanting roof of the barn opposite the entrance. "Hey," he called, waving a hammer, "big news for you." While I chased the old gander, who snapped at my apron, I heard him say, "It's my last job. I'll be a soldier tomorrow." "Really?" I called back, "but what on earth are you doing?" "Inviting the stork," he laughed. Raising his voice above the deafening racket of geese, ducks, chickens, and Napoleon, shouted, "It's good luck to have a stork family on the farm. I'm fastening an old wagon wheel on top of this roof so Mr. Stork can build his nest when he comes back from the south." Banging on a nail, he began to sing, "Hurrah for the life of a soldier." I left my little wagon before the farmkeeper's house at the right of the gate. I saw that last winter had been disastrous to the picture painted on its white stone wall. It represented the shepherds praying before the little child Christ. But the cold had cracked the shepherds and the rain, and snow had almost washed the little Jesus away. Adjoining the keeper's house was the stable. The 4 low windows were wide open, and I heard the melancholy mooing of a cow. Chickens of all colors and variety dashed over the yard, but the old rooster was undisturbed in spite of the general excitement over our arrival. He continued scratching on a pile of manure in the farthest right corner. "The pride of the farm," I laughed, remembering the farmer's words, "the higher the pile, the richer the farm." Suddenly, Rezzy, the keeper's wife, came rushing from the chicken house at the end of the stable. Shouting, she ordered Napoleon to go back into his kennel. Clacking her wooden shoes, she chased the old gander. A black woolen kerchief almost covered her face. The bottom of her skirt was tucked into the apron string around her waist. "Grüß Gott, Rezzy," we called, but she turned her back upon us and disappeared into the stable. Winking to her husband, who made faces at me from the roof, I followed her. Dodging the switching tails of the 4 cows, we crowded along the pig pen to a dark corner. Here crouched Rezzy, by the side of a large red hen, who was sitting on a basket. "I put duck eggs under her," gentled Rezzy. "I'm afraid she won't sit them out." With that she tied an empty basket over the poor hen and chuckled, "Well, old girl, whether you want to or not, I'm the boss." Rezzy mounted the 3 wooden steps at the end of the stable, opened a narrow door, kicked off her wooden shoes and entered her house. We scraped our boots on an iron mat and straggled behind her. We crossed a little square hall with painted pillars and scoured benches against the wall. In the living room, Rezzy asked us to wait while she disappeared through the door leading to her bedroom. Clara sat opposite the window on a bench which encircled the Dutch tiled oven. She tied a string to its shiny brass railing and played with the kittens. Feeny stood before the niche in which was a statue of St. Mary. She fussed with the flowers and straightened a wreath of colored glass beads. I wandered around the room. The red and blue checkered curtains swayed in a gentle breeze through the open window. The wallpaper, with its tiny bouquets of rose buds, was badly faded. I was fascinated by the pictures around the room. There was one of a sailboat in a storm, another of a girl, with flowing hair listening to a seashell, and a large color photograph of Rezzy and her groom in their wedding costumes. Along the wall, next to the entrance, was a long cupboard. Each of its doors was painted with a basket of red roses, blue forget-me-nots, and lilacs. Above hung a wide shelf arranged with colored plates, beer steins, and fancy boxes. I moved slowly along the low narrow table in the center of the room. I smeared its brass railing with my thumb. Then I watched a buzzing fly trying to free itself from a sticky strip of paper which dangled from the ceiling above the table. I noticed a small oval mirror opposite the door to the bedroom. Standing before it, I shifted from one side to the other, amusing myself over its funny reflections. Suddenly, I caught a glimpse of Rezzy in her bedroom. Crouched on the floor, she was busy laying something into the drawer below her bed. Talking to herself, she looked nervously around about. Finally, she closed the drawer and joined us. Resi washed her face and hands below the pump in the stable. She tied a clean apron around her waist and began to milk the cows. Her hands moved rapidly. Soon the wooden buckets were overflowing with steaming milk. I emptied them into the cans which we had brought from Neuburg. "On your way," called Resi. But Feeney said, "Mama wants us to bring some eggs." "What?" exclaimed Resi, crossing her arms. "Most of the hens are sitting. Does your mama expect me to lay eggs?" Nevertheless, she brought us a box with 1 dozen. Feeney tucked them into her knapsack, and we were about to leave. Suddenly the picture I saw in the oval mirror flashed through my mind. I had always suspected Resi of selling some of the farm products for her own profit. I rushed past her, through the living room, to her bedroom and opened the drawer I had watched her fill and close with so much care. Resi ran after me. She shook me furiously and would have slapped me if her husband had not entered at this moment. Without a word, but almost crying with rage, she helped me pack the many dozens of eggs.